question is how do I work with my clients to really transform their body and mind? And such a great question. You know, the women that I work with, and really I think that the way that I teach really does also extend to men as well. But when it comes to weight loss, the way that I teach is really about sustainable weight loss. And what's really important to know is that, you know, diet culture, what diet culture teaches us is always to go straight for the nutrition, straight for the fitness. And we can, you know, for a lot of us who are determined and are excited and who are like ready to hit our goals, a lot of times we can go right for that and white knuckle it and muscle our way through whatever, you know, 4, 6, 8 week, 12-week program it is. And we might get results. Maybe we'll lose the weight. But then what can happen for a lot of us, which is why a lot of men and women find themselves losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, is because as soon as we finish with these programs, right, diet culture teaches us nothing about how to build sustainable habits. It teaches us nothing about the actual process of making it a lifestyle, and it focuses everything on the outcome goal, right, the actual weight loss. And because we don't have the systems in the place, the mindset, the habits, the processes, we end up going right back to our comfort zones, right back to what we did before, right back to our old thought patterns, belief systems, all of it, and the weight comes back. So my whole mission in life is really to teach. I primarily work with women, but teaching women on what are the big dial movers when it comes to sustainable weight loss so that you find a lifestyle that works for you.
Okay, Amber, I love that. And you alluded to many things that I do want to highlight there. So there is this stigma that is present within the diet culture, right? The ideology, like you alluded to, that we're going towards a goal. And it's good to have goals. But if you're not looking at the process, how to get to that goal, or just looking for that goal, it's going to be, let's put in parentheses, easy to hit that goal, which is a weight loss, which is X, Y, and Z. But are you going to be able to maintain it? And this is where what you're talking about is something that we have to mention, especially in the diet culture today. They teach us techniques that are not sustainable and not necessarily the healthy way to go about it. So what are some tips, methodologies, habits that you teach your community how to go about doing that? Is it through keto diet? Is it through a plant-based diet? Is it through fasting? What's your approach?
So my approach is actually very, very simple. And it's because I think that we have way overcomplicated nutrition. You know, my approach to sustainable weight loss, because again, we're talking about, when we say sustainable, it's what's going to last. What can you incorporate into your life that becomes effortless, right? That is easy, that's enjoyable, because anything short of that, you're not going to stick to it. Right? So it's about finding ways to make healthy food enjoyable. It's about letting go of this all or nothing mentality. It's about letting go of that diet mentality that I have to be perfect if I'm going to succeed, right? And because sustainable weight loss is about being consistent most of the time over time. It's not about these quick fixes. It's not about doing these restrictive things that are outside of things that work for your life, things that are outside of like things you like to eat. I'll never forget the story of like a woman who I was coaching, and she was like, you know, for years I've eaten balsamic vinaigrette on my salads because I've always been told that that's the healthiest salad dressing. She's like, but I actually freaking hate balsamic vinaigrette. And she's like, no wonder. I'm like, no wonder you couldn't stay consistent with it, right? We keep slamming our heads against the wall. So going back to your original question of like, what are some tips? The first thing is getting more real food into your diet. If you could literally start with like the very simple step of like minimizing the stuff in a box, the stuff in a package, and just shopping the perimeters of the grocery store, you could do wonders for your health, right? So that's the first step. The second step that I love to teach people about, and this does go back to building habits though, it's about building habits in a very slow and sustainable way. So many times we want to go right for the end goal, right? It's like, okay, I want to work out in the morning. So I need to work out in the mornings, right? Okay, that's your goal. And you might find that you keep missing that. You keep pressing snooze. You can't seem to do it. And then what happens? Like you just keep getting more and more frustrated, more and more down on yourself. And what I coach women to do, and this is good for men into, but it's really to back it up. Get to the root. Why are you pressing snooze, right? Like, what's your nighttime routine? If you want to wake up earlier in the morning, start with your nighttime routine. And for some people, it's actually if you start with your nighttime routine and you can't seem to fall asleep, well, then maybe you actually start with your afternoon routine. Are you having a cup of coffee at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So it's about, if you're really interested in building a sustainable lifestyle, it's about building the habits and starting at getting to the root of what's really going on and starting with that. And that's how you start to build some momentum and make it a lifestyle.
Okay, Amber, there's so many things you just dropped there. That was amazing knowledge, and I want to do the best here to highlight certain things for our viewers and listeners over here. So first and foremost, you mentioned the food in itself. Try to take food that is on the outside of the grocery store. So we're talking about foods that if you leave it on the counter X amount of days, it will get old. The more food that you buy that can last on the counter for weeks on end, then that's only what you're consuming. There's an issue there. And there's one thing that I actually allude to is actually the vibratory rate of the food. So you have to look at food not only as a nutrient, but as well what vibratory rate you're putting in yourself within that body in itself, right? So that's one thing that you mentioned there. I 100% agree with it. And we are talking about percentages here. You know, you mentioned the client that you worked with, like, doesn't like balsamic oil, but thought that's what they have to do. No, there is place to have play food, right? Instead of junk food, I call it play food, to have those moments. But if it's all that you're having, that's where the issue is. So that's one thing. Second thing you alluded to is your habits and rituals towards your sleeping pattern and your nighttime routine if you want to wake up early. So everything is correlated, right? And not only everything is correlated to your habits, but what you're consuming as well. So Amber, I think I had mentioned this to you on a previous conversation. I do intermittent fasting, and I do it like in an intense way in certain regards because I do it for athletic reasons, not weight loss, but more performance reasons and recuperation reasons. My AGH is higher when my insulin is lower, so that's why I do a lot of intermittent fasting. Now, why I'm saying this is I've noticed if I don't have more than 4 hours, not more, but like max 4 hours before going to bed, not eating at all, my night is horrible asleep because I track my sleep. Now, where it comes about, where it happens, it's not the 2 first cycles of sleep, but it's the 2 last ones. So you have to be aware with certain elements of what you're consuming at the proper moment. So I love what you said in that regards because everything is kind of correlated. Now, Amber, in this end, when you're commenting about the food and the diet culture, can you please talk about the misconception and maybe the ideology and fear that some women and men have nowadays in regards to what society is telling them and how they have to look, how they have to eat, and so on? Because I do have a story with that I do want to share after what you're going to mention on that end. So what is the social pressures that you might feel, and what can we do to not feel those social pressures anymore?
Oh, that's such a good question, and it's such a deep. I think for so many of us, it's a deep rooted question when we start asking that question for ourselves. Because I know, and I don't want to limit this to just women. I know if men were to be honest about it, there's a lot of men that struggle with this too. You know, a lot of us. I'm 43, and I grew up in the age when it was all about diet culture. Like when I mean, it's still a lot about diet culture, but I grew up in the period where like that's all my mom and my aunts and my sisters, like, I'm not my sisters, my aunts and my grandmother, everybody, like that's all they talked about, right? And so from a very early age, I was led to believe, and I really did believe, that the body that I had was not okay. And that and I learned at a very early age, and I was talking about this on my podcast today, actually. I didn't realize this until like years later in therapy, but it was like I learned at a very age to associate my value and my worth with how my body looked. And that was a message that really was the catalyst to me having an eating disorder in my early 20s. It was, the catalyst and kind of the precursor to me being body obsessed for most of my life, because I really even subconsciously had it in my mind that I wasn't good enough if I didn't look a certain way. And that's a very, very destructive and demoralizing, I think, way to live your life. And so I think one of the things that, and I actually just recorded a podcast on this, and I talk a lot about this, about really the dangers of kind of outsourcing your worth to something external, right? And the reason, for so many of us, the reason why the scale and the size of our body and how we look, men and women, right? I think women may be a little more scale obsessed, but still men are very, could be worried whether or not they have abs, do they got a dad bod, like whatever that looks like, right? There's social pressures for them too. Now, I'm not saying that we are going to be able to like wipe out the social pressures, that like the multi-billion dollar diet industry wouldn't allow us to do that. Okay. But I think what it is it's really getting honest with yourself. Like when you set these goals for yourself about maybe wanting to lose weight, about maybe wanting to be a certain size, what's the real motivator for you there? What's the real intention? I know for me, this was a very like powerful exercise that I did. For years, I was obsessed with being like a size 4 or size 6, depending on like what weight I was at. That was like my goal. But I always wanted to be this size. And it like ruled my freaking life. It was like, I was just so body obsessed like all the time. And really, this is like through the work that I had done, like I said, with a therapist. It was like at the end of the day, what I realized, because I kept finding myself in this position where I would like lose the weight in a really unhealthy way. And then it would like not be enough. I still want to be happy. And I'm like, how am I still not happy? I lost the weight, but I'm still not happy. Now I want to be a size 2. Like, what or whatever. And I see this happen with women that I coach too. And so it's really important so that you don't keep like chasing you're raising the bar, chasing your tail, like keep setting it higher and higher and higher, that you really get a clear understanding of like what's the true intention of why you want that goal. Goals are not bad, but it's the intention behind it that's what's important, right? And so I think that kind of, bringing it back to like, how do we navigate like social pressures and like, all of these messages that we're getting, I think it really starts with doing some honest work on yourself, of really finding your value and your worth from within, and really, really getting clear and being honest with yourself of, does my value, is my confidence unshakable? Is it radical? Is it unshakable? Or is it tied to that number on the scale? Or is it tied to that body that Sports Illustrated is telling me that I should have? Like, where does my confidence come from? Because the true goal is to have that, like I said, that unshakable confidence. And then that allows you to set goals from, I think, a different place, from an honest place, from a true place, and I think a healthier place. So,
Amber, I love what you just mentioned there. And one story that I want to kind of correlate in this end, when I started realizing how heavily the diet culture affects many people, but affects women, I'm going to say in a longer period of time, because it was so much more predominantly prone in our society to make women look a certain way. And it's just new men going into that. Like before, men didn't care how they looked, the shaved, this, it wasn't as present. Now it is. Men are feeling the exact same thing that you're mentioning. Is just new to us, but that has been there. And for me, when I realized that is when my sister gave me the book, Intuitive Eating. And when she gave me that book, which I truly recommend, she wrote a little passage, a foreword, especially for me, because I'm somebody that's very intense, as my viewers and listeners know. I'm very goal-oriented, and I always used to support my sister, being like, hey, you want to be this weight or this, that, and the other? All right, cool. What are you doing to work out? What are you doing with this? What are you eating? And I was doing it out of love, but I was doing it the wrong way in regards to being noticing of like, hey, what is society telling her whole life, and what is she feeling with everything around it? And then by reading this book, I realized that food is so much more complex, linked up with emotions. Like, why are we eating? Is it because we're stressed? Is it because there's emotions? Is it because I'm bored? Is it X, Y, and Z? And being just aware of it is already you're winning. And then if you're a moment, you're like, you know what, I'm bored today and I want to like, just eat popcorn or whatever. All right, cool. I'm not always bored. Today I'm bored. I'm allowing it. So let me enjoy it. So certain triggers like this that you disassociate from making food as good and bad, because all food is good. This is why in this book, this is why I learned, like they said junk food, and like junk is garbage. No, wait a minute. If you're putting it in your mouth, it's not garbage. It should be play food. Every food has its place, but you should be cognitively aware of, are you eating a lot of play food or eating other types of food? So that's one thing I wanted to allude to. Second thing that you mentioned, it was so spot on in regards to what are the goals of what you're achieving. The only way you're going to actually hit it is actually the purpose, not the goal. And you alluded to men, right, with abs. In my early 20s, I had the goal like, I want abs, I want to be like this, because that's what we have been told of what a successful individual man looks like. And for so long, I wanted that. And I've always been somebody active, working out, and so on. And when I was chasing it, I never had it. Once I fell in love with what I was doing, which is CrossFit, and really fell in love with the methodology and the sport, it naturally happened. Because I love the sport so much, and everything was like, how can I get better at the sport? I start tweaking things here and there. And now I walk around with abs without even thinking about it, because it's the process that I'm in love with. So Amber, when you are speaking to people like this and you're talking about these tools and these methodologies, we're talking about certain aspects. What would you say in percentage that you have to work on compared to the mindset, compared to the actual transformation or the methodology or the actual body transformation in that regards? Is there a certain percentage that you see that there is difference on that end?
I don't know that I have any like scientific backed reasoning behind this percentage, but I'm going to tell you what my knee jerk reaction was when you asked that question. And I was going to say like 70-30. And honestly, so like, I really do believe that. I really do believe, I am a body transformation expert, but I go about it a completely different way. Diet culture teaches us to go through, like to lead with action, but that doesn't last. That's not to say we have to lead with our mindset. It is all about mindset and mindfulness, right? And so I absolutely, like, I do stand by, like, I really do think it's like 7. If you don't have the right mindset, it doesn't matter. Like, this is a perfect example. I was talking to a woman, a client that I'm coaching right now, and we set some goals for her this past week. And some of the goals were for her to start moving her body, right? I'm a big believer in, like, if you've not exercised for a while, let's just get into the habit of actually creating space and the mindset that you're going to exercise. Then we can start filling that space with whatever you want. But let's do something now that like is easy, is enjoyable, like all of it, and get in the habit. So so every week we meet and talk about our goals. And she came back the following week after we'd set the goals, and she says, "Well, I didn't do any of my like walking goals." And I was like, "Okay, well, let's talk about that, right? Like, no shame, but let's get clinical with it. Let's take out the emotion, right? Let's get clinical. Why did that happen?" She's like, "Well, I think I just get busy like doing everything for everybody else, and I don't make time for myself." And we talked a little bit about this, and really what we got down to was, and I asked her a very simple question of like, well, what's the payoff there for you? Like, you are getting some benefit out of that, whether or not it's the feeling of being needed, it's that feeling of being wanted, of like that, or whatever, how, whatever it is, as far as like being a mom, like you're getting some sort of payoff there. But what I had said to her was, we've got to look at that, because I don't care how much I teach you about kale. I don't care how much I teach you about exercise. If you don't start with really shifting the mindset of taking like radical ownership of your life and learning to make yourself a priority, none of this is going to matter. It doesn't matter. So yes, this is why I say, and this is so much of why in all of my programs, we lead heavily with mindset, which is what makes me different when it comes to weight loss. But that's why, because it sets you up for everything.
I love that you said that, because honestly, I was thinking as I was asking them, like, I would probably say 80-20. So the fact that you're saying 70-30, I think it's really spot on, because the honest truth is everything starts with a decision. If the decision is not there in that person to do something, you could have the best trainers, you could have the best food in front of you, you could have the X, Y, and Z, and it will never happen. And that decision has to be linked up with that purpose in itself, which, like you're alluding to, Amber, over here. So once you get these, like I said, I'm sure you work with some amazing people, and you get them to their goals and to their lifestyle that they want. Now, what's the next step? How do we make it sustainable? Now, we talked about obviously some tricks on that end, but is there a threshold of like, hey, once you got here, what are the next things that you need to do to keep it sustainable? Now, what do I mean by this? we kind of alluded to like the for weighing yourself, right? And that could be really like something that's good and bad is for certain people. But at the same time, I truly believe if you do want to succeed, you do have to have a measuring tool, right? Because sometimes you kind of get lost, like, oh my God, this happened, that happened, and I didn't notice it. So once they get to that level, what do you teach to maintain it year after year in a sustainable way that's not like starving themselves and so on?
So here's what's really funny though about like what kind of my beliefs on like having a way of measuring. You know, I think if most people were to get honest with themselves, they would absolutely know before they wrapped any measuring tape around them, before they held any fat device thing to measure body fat, before they stepped on any scale, before they put on any pair of pants, any amount of weight gained that's worth even noticing, they are going to know before most people will know, right? And so I think, I'm not saying I'm anti any sort of tracking, but I think that, of course, like if you know, it depends on the level of your goals. For most people that have gone through the work of achieving, you know, getting to that level, they've achieved their goals, they're pretty in tune with their body. And so if you can use, my advice is that if you can use those measuring tools just as data points without it being triggering, without it being obsessive. If you notice that you are doing it because, like, I have a client who's constantly weighs herself because she has so much fear that she's going to gain the weight back. That to me is unhealthy. That's very unhealthy. And so I think that it goes back to the intention, right? If it's like, if you can, you know, weigh yourself every now and again, if you just want to check in again, I haven't weighed myself in years. I don't need to. I know exactly how my body is. Yes, I mean, and I know if I were to go on vacation, probably I'll come back if I were to get on the scale 4, 5, 8 pounds heavier. A lot of that's water weight. I just get right back to doing what I was doing because I enjoy it. It's a lifestyle. The way I eat, it's sustainable. It's not a diet. I enjoy the foods I'm eating. And then that weight will come off. So, you know, I think it just, again, it depends on, you know, whether or not you can really truly use it as a data point. But I would say, like, when somebody gets to the point of maintenance, for me, and this is why when people work with me, when women, because I primarily work with women, it is a little bit of a slower process, but the weight that you lose doesn't come back. And the reason why is because when I got to that maintenance place, right, and that's where I'm at now, and I've been at for years now, I'm not really doing anything different than what I was doing when I was trying to lose weight. For most people, if most people can actually consistently is the key word here, can consistently eat in their maintenance range for what they should be in for food, they will most likely lose weight. And here's why. It's because the problem typically is not because you're like, the problem typically of why people struggle to lose weight, it's not necessarily like the calorie amount. It can be, but it's more oftentimes than not the inconsistency. It's like the restrictive eating followed by like the weekend warrior who binges all weekend. It's the, you know, the person who maybe eats healthy all day long and then goes headfirst into the snack pantry at night. The real truth is that if most people would just start by just kind of focusing on being consistent most of the time with kind of that maintenance range, you would most likely lose weight. So then when you go to when you are at maintenance, right, it's like, for me, it didn't really change that much. I just realized that I had a little bit more like flexibility to have those kind of more play foods, or I call them move the needle foods, but same thing. I had a little more flexibility with that. But because I was so much into a rhythm with like eating foods that satisfied me, kind of like, and feeling throughout my day, finishing every meal feeling satisfied, then it didn't really have to change that much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I truly love what you're saying because it really comes down to the consistency, right? Like Bruce Lee has always said it, like in his quote, he's like, I'm not afraid of the person that does, 2,000 kicks in a day. He's like, I'm afraid of the person that does one kick for 1,000 days in a row. That consistency ideology is going to serve so much better for you in the long run and in your lifestyle. So that approach of like, hey, just eat what you want to eat in a consistent way, but don't do those, okay, super, dieting today, and then you get at home like, oh my God, I'm tired, and all you have is chips because that's what you have access to, or you're like you said, like the weekend warrior binging. Like I've been through that. Like it's not fun. There's a lot of ups and downs. Towards if you keep that consistency with eating things that are satiating and hitting that like that true joy, like you have to know what you like as well. Like I'm somebody that's a sweet tooth. 100% I have to finish anytime I eat something sweet. And if I do not finish eating something sweet, even though I ate all my proper calories, my body's like, yo, there's something missing. So you just have to be aware of it. You're the same. So you just have to be aware of it and kind of allude to that. So Amber, I want to be respectful for your time here. I just have one last question for you. It was so great speaking to you. Where is the best place that our community could get in touch with you if they're interested to be like, hey, what do you do exactly to help people with the weight loss? How could they contact you to get to know more about you and your services?
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm definitely here on Instagram. I am my phone. Oh, sorry, an alarm going off. I love connecting with people in my DMs. I mean, it's not a bot or VA or anything like that. It literally is me responding. I love connecting. So I would love for you to reach out. Let me know, if something we talked about resonated, if something you're struggling with. I would love to connect with you and then and share with you, some things I've got coming up. I actually do have a free 2-day event coming up. I'm really excited. This is for women over 40 who are looking to really gain the tools of building that foundation for sustainable weight loss. What does that really look like to lose the weight and have it not come back so that they can, stop dieting their way through life. So if you head over to my page over on here on Instagram, I'm at MS Amber Shaw. You could go to the link in my bio, sign up for it. It's November 15th and 16th. I'm really excited. And then of course, I would love for you to tune into the Wellness Revolution podcast. You can grab that wherever you subscribe to podcasts. And that's a really fun platform for me.
Amber, thank you very much for that. Everything you mentioned will be in the show notes below. But yeah, 100%. If you guys have access to that free workshop that you're going to give, go ahead and just, go with your peers and so on. So Amber, it was such a pleasure having you on this show. We'll definitely continue this conversation. I truly love that we're putting this in the forefront because a lot of people, when they go through this, maybe they'll think that they're the only person that's going through it, but it's not true. Everybody goes through it in different levels. So such a pleasure having you on the show. We'll do this again very soon.
Bye. Thank you.